Good morning to you all and welcome to the Vicarage here at Penn on this Wednesday. I hope whatever you have planned for today, it's good, and hope you know God with you in a very special way. Me, day off today, golf course, looking forward to it very much. Nice quiet day today. Anyway, God be with you and good to see you this morning or this evening. Now, we're, as I say, towards the back end now of the Acts of the Apostles, and to remind you that Paul's been to Jerusalem, and over the couple of years he's evaded 2 riots, 2 trials, 2 assassination attempts, Roman torture, and various other things he's managed to elude. And finally, because he's appealed to Caesar, he has to go to Rome. And it kind of goes a bit like this. Now, it's quite a long reading this morning. It's 38 verses, and it does read a bit like something out the shipping forecast or the shipping log or something. But bear with me, and I'll try and explain it to you at the end. So I'm starting at Acts 27 and reading the first 38 verses. So it's quite a long reading, but just bear with me this morning. When it was decided we were to sail for Italy, they transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Embarking on a ship can't possibly read that, that was about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to see his friends to be cared for. Putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. After we'd sailed across the sea that is of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, and as the wind was against us, we sailed under the lee of Crete under Salmone. Sailing past it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near the city of Lycia. Since much time had been lost and sailing was now dangerous, because even the fast had already gone by, Paul advised them, saying, "Sirs, I can see the voyage will be with much danger and much heavy loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owner of the ship than what Paul said. Since the harbour was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favour of putting to sea from there, on the chance that they might somehow reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. It was a harbour of Crete facing southwest and northwest. When a moderate south wind began to blow, they thought they could achieve their purpose, so they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete close to the shore. But soon a violent wind called the northeaster rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. By running under the lee of a small island called Corda, we were safely able to get the ship's boat under control. After hoisting it, they took measures to undergird the ship. Then, fearing they'd run onto the Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and so were driven. We were being pounded by the storm so violently that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they'd been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me, and not set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there'll be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of God to whom I belong, and whom I worship, and he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor, and indeed God has granted safety to all those sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island.' When the 14th night had come, and as we were drifting across the Sea of Adria, at midnight, the sailors suspected they were nearing land. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took soundings again and found 15 fathoms. Fearing we might run on the rocks, they set down anchors from the stern and prayed for the day to come. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered the boat into the sea, on the pretext of putting out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion soldiers, 'Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved.' And the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift. Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day that you've been in suspense and remaining without food and have eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for with it you will survive, and none of you will lose a hair from your heads.' After he'd said this, he took bread, giving thanks to God in presence of all, He broke it and began to eat. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, as you see, it's quite a long reading, but thank you for bearing with me this morning. Two things to bring out this morning. Firstly to say is that Luke who wrote this, was clearly in the boat with Paul. Hence we get such incredible detail, such slightly irritating detail of all the various ports and places that they stayed in. So it does tell you that Luke was there. And also he says the word we quite a lot as well. So Luke was clearly in the boat with Paul when this was all going on. Secondly, Paul, considering he was a prisoner in chains, was relatively well looked after. Earlier on, he's allowed to they stay at one port, and Paul, to say, despite being a prisoner in chains, is allowed to go and see his friends. But then you get this bit later on, and they get to a place called Fair Havens, and it's getting towards winter, and and they've got a choice. They can either carry on their journey, or they can stop for a while. And Paul tells them, this is, there will be trouble ahead. So he tells them to stop where they are, but they think they know better, and so they carry on. And lo and behold, they get into this incredible storm that goes on for day after day, in which they can't see anything or hear anything. And then Paul stands up and he says, firstly he says, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so, and this is the trouble we're in now. But he says, good news is that last night an angel of God stood beside me and told us that God is in this and that we're going to be fine. And what is interesting is that because of this, Paul gets this kind of supernatural leadership ability, because from that moment on, they kind of listen to what he says. And later on, he advises them to eat because they're getting hungry and tired and so on. And he listens to what they say, but they listen to what he says. But no, it's not just him that gets that. Notice also you hear that the soldiers, the sailors were praying as well. So clearly the faith that Paul had got had rubbed off on him. And I do believe that knowing God with us through the trials and strains of life does help us. It doesn't mean that we are cool as cucumbers or super cool dudes or something, but I think it does mean that we are cooler than we might otherwise have been. I do remember 5 years ago, I had a major operation for cancer, prostate cancer operation, and afterwards, like you do, you go to the doctors and he tells you what, good news or bad news. And I'm a coward, I'm a coward. But I do remember having a strong sense that God was with me in it, and that whatever happened, it would be all right. And that the presence of God with me, I'm not going to say it made me cool, but it made me cooler than I would otherwise have been. And I think that's what faith in God does. It does reassure us that God is with us. And I want to say something at the moment, something very topical about this coronavirus thing. There's a lot of thing going on at the moment, and there's a lot of fear around and people confused and so on. And for some reason, I really believe, my friends, that God is with us in this. I don't know why I'm so cheerful at the moment, but I am. I really do believe that God is doing something with us in this, that God is with us and that God is working his purpose out and God is with us in it. I don't know why I'm so cheerful, but I am. But because I really believe, as I said, that God is doing something and God is with us in it. Not to say I've got all the answers, but I believe that God has a purpose in it. And may you know today, may you know God with you, helping you, carrying you, reassuring you, and blessing you this day as well. God be with you. Have a good, lovely day. I'll see you tomorrow.